Welcome back to Personal Finance Week 4. This week we'll mostly be talking about borrowing and credit. We'll touch a little bit on banking, but since that was mostly covered in the section on savings, there's not a whole lot additional to say. So why do people actually borrow money? Well, they do it for a few reasons. Primarily, they do it because they want to get things that they can't afford right now. So, for example, a lot of people borrow for college education. As you know, there's a huge amount of student debt out there right now. People borrow to buy a car. They might need the car in order to get to work before they have the job, right? They need to have a car in order to get to work, and then they get the job, and then they earn money, and then they can pay back the car. They might borrow to buy a house, and in fact, most people who own houses, the house is actually, primarily owned by the bank, and they have a mortgage on the house. People also borrow for a lot of short-term things, like buying clothes and jewelry, meals and vacations, and they often do that on a credit card, which isn't necessarily a good idea. Borrowing is not inherently bad. Some people think it is, but generally speaking, it allows you to be able to manage things like getting a car and a house and a college education. But getting, obviously, in over your head in debt is definitely a bad idea and very hard to dig out of. So if you're wanting to borrow money, the lender is going to look at what they call the 3 C's of credit. And the term credit is used in any context of lending, not just a credit card. If they're going to extend credit to you, they're going to do a credit check, they're going to do a credit background on you. That's for any kind of loan. And the 3 C's of credit are character, capacity, and collateral. And character basically means, are you an upstanding citizen? Can we count on you? Are you reliable, trustworthy, etc.? Capacity means, are you able to actually pay us back? Are you capable of it? So character says you will pay us back because you're a trustworthy, upstanding citizen, and capacity says and you can. So willing and able. And then collateral is if you have something of value that you can put what we call put against the loan. And car loans and home mortgages both have collateral. The car is the collateral in a car loan. The house is the collateral in a mortgage. And that means that there is actually something for the lender to take, to seize, if you actually don't pay back. So you usually are able to get a lower interest rate on collateralized loans than on what we call unsecured loans. Okay, so a few other terms, kind of a long list here, related to credit. Interest, you know what interest is. Interest is the price of using money. So you either pay interest if you're borrowing money or you gain interest if you're lending money. Risk is really what's the risk of losing money, right? We're not talking about other risks like risks of endangering your health or your life. We're talking about the risk of losing money. And any kind of lender is going to evaluate the risk that you pose. They want to know, is this person trustworthy, right? Do they have the capacity to pay me back? Do they have the character? So they're going to analyze you any way they can. And really what they're going to look at is your credit score, and we'll look at that more in a little bit. There are a few different credit rating agencies, and each of them issues a score. This range, 300 to 850, is actually the FICO range, and that was developed by Fair Isaac Corporation. And there are other credit score companies have slightly different ranges. But when people think about credit scores, they're generally thinking like 300 to 800. And having a high score is definitely better. It's really, really hard to have an 850. But if your credit score is over 800, you're going to be considered a really low credit risk. Okay, they're really not going to worry about your ability to pay them back. The lender gets this information from something called a credit report. So they can actually request a credit report on you. And when they get the credit report, it gives them more than just the score. It will give them a whole printout of all the loans that you have outstanding. If you had a Macy's card and you charged something on it last month, it'll also tell about applications. So if you just applied for a bunch of credit cards, that's on there. All kinds of information going all the way back, in my case, to like the first house that I bought in Wichita, Kansas in 1993. That's on there. Like we borrowed the money and we paid it back. So every kind of borrowing and lending transaction of your entire life really ends up on your credit report. You can actually get a copy of this, and one place to get it is annualcreditreport.com. There are other sources, and we can talk about those in terms of Quiz Bowl. But you should know that you are entitled to one free credit report each year. You can actually see what it is lenders will find out about you. We talked about collateral. An unsecured loan is a loan that does not have collateral. So a college loan, for example, is an unsecured loan. They can't come seize your college education and take it away from you. Store credit is if you get like a Macy's card or a Target card, those can be considered store credit. Also, some stores traditionally used to do a different form of store credit that was sort of more informal, where you could buy things and have an account with the store and just sort of put it on your name. But now most store credit's pretty formalized. And store credit cards tend to actually charge higher rates than the more general credit cards like a Visa or MasterCard do. The last two on here are really more sort of unsavory rip-off ways to borrow money. So payday loans, there's a lot of these places, especially in poorer neighborhoods where people are less likely to have access to banks. And what people might do is, let's say my electricity bill is due and I don't have any cash, but I know I'm getting paid next week. What I'll do is I'll actually go to the payday lender, borrow money, promising to sign over my check when I get it. And they charge really high rates of interest, like 30% or something annualized rates of interest. So really, really high rates of interest. And then rent-to-own plans are places like Rent-A-Center and other places where you can actually rent furniture with the ultimate goal of buying it. So let's say you want a couch and it's an $800 couch and you can't afford it. You go to Rent-A-Center, you get the couch, you put it in your apartment today, and you pay maybe, $50 a month for it, or maybe $20 a month for it. But studies have been done that show that people who use rent-to-own plans end up paying like twice as much for the couch as somebody who just buys the couch, or even putting it on a credit card is better than rent-to-own. Okay, so this gives you a little bit more information on the credit score. This nice pie chart shows you the percentages of each part of the credit score. This is all very, very general. They don't really release their exact formula. So they're looking at your payment history. Okay, they want to know, do you make all your payments, right? Do you always pay at least what you owe, what the bill says? And by the way, the bill is like very small percentage, like 5% of what you actually owe. So if you borrow, let's say on a credit card, you charge up $100, they're going to say, you owe, and I can't remember the exact percentage, so we'll have to look at that, but your bill might be for like $5 or $10. But that's what they're checking, is just, do you always pay your bill? So more is better. You want to always pay your bill. Credit utilization, less is better. So they want to see that you're not really using more than 25% of all the credit that's accessible to you. So they're going to be looking at all of the different lines of credit that you have and what percentage of it you're using. Credit history is this length of credit history part. Longer is better. If you get your first credit card or your first car loan in your early 20s, that's going to help you in your 30s and 40s. If you're 40 and you've never had any kind of credit and you go to buy a house, that's not going to be good. They won't lend to you. New credit, so if you're applying for new credit cards or new loans, that's actually bad. And it's really frustrating because if you, let's say you're in the middle of buying a house and your car, breaks down and you have to buy a new car, putting in the credit application for the loan for the car can negatively impact and cause the interest rate on your house to go up right at that moment, because it's seen as, oh, you're out seeking too much new credit at the same time. And then a credit mix is seen as good. So they want to see that you have a home loan and a car loan and college loans and other things, because they want to see that you can manage a variety of bills and keep everything up to date. Okay, so the terms of any kind of loan, including credit, but right now we're going to focus more on other kinds of loan like car loans, include these. So risk, what's the risk that you'll pay back or not? What is the principal, and that's the size of the loan. So are you borrowing, say, $10,000 for a used car, or are you borrowing $400,000 for a luxury house, right? If you are borrowing more, you're tying up more of the lender's money, so they're probably going to charge you a higher interest rate. Although with collateral and other factors, it can be hard to sort of tease that out. Number of payments. Are you buying the car on a 3-year, 36-month loan? Are you buying the house on a 15-year mortgage? Are you buying the house on a 30-year mortgage, or even worse, a jumbo mortgage? So number of payments, again, you're tying up their money. So the less time, the lower the interest rate, okay? A 36-month car loan is going to have a lower interest rate than a 48-month car loan. A 15-year home loan is going to have a lower interest rate than a 30-year home loan. And number of payments and time, of course, go together, right? However, I should point out that you can have the same time. You can have a 15-year loan, and rather than paying it off once a month, you can pay it off every 2 weeks, and you will make actually 2 extra payments a year, and you'll pay off your house in 12 years instead of 15. So you actually end up spending less money. The actual interest that you pay on a loan is not exactly the same as the advertised interest rate. It's called the annual percentage rate, or the APR, and this includes payments toward loan costs. So it's actually higher than the published interest rate. I'm still working on a good example of how to calculate this. So we should talk about this when we meet. If I can find a good video or brief explanation, I will definitely post that on Moodle. This is just a little bit of a look at some of the car loans that are out there, or different loan rates, sorry. So car loans, 7%. College loans, if they're subsidized by the federal government, they're about 3.4%. Unsubsidized ones tend to run a lot higher because that's subsidy from the government. It's kind of like a collateral to the lender. The 30-year home mortgages running between 3 and 4%. Credit cards are always much, much higher, 13 to 15%. If you have a credit card with points, which means you earn sort of rewards back for using your credit card, they can be as high as 25%. And then personal loan rates, there really is no source on finding out what people pay on personal loans. A few student loan facts. FAFSA, as we know, is the free application for federal student aid. Not the federal application, right? Free application for federal student aid. In order to qualify for student loans, you must have your parents and you together fill out the FAFSA, and you have to report, your parents have to report their income, they have to report their assets, you have to report your income. It's very detailed, and some people find it very onerous. They don't want to have to do it. You also, if you are a male, you have to register for the draft. You cannot qualify for student loans if you are not registered for selective service. If you have a student loan, it cannot be eliminated in bankruptcy. Student loans are one of the few things that cannot actually be wiped out in bankruptcy. You do not need a credit score because student loans are generally going to people who are 18, 19, 20. And as I said before, they can be subsidized by the government or they can be unsubsidized. So other types of credit. What are the pros and cons of each? We have home mortgages. Home mortgages, as I said before, they allow you to buy a house when you may not necessarily be able to afford one right away. Not very many people have $300,000 sitting around. So you can actually pay toward it while you're living in it instead of paying rent. Car loans, same thing. College loans really allow you to build your human capital. It's debatable whether all college loans are a good idea or all the college debt we have is a good idea. I will say one thing about college debt is that the published numbers also include the debt for professional schools. So a lot of that debt is actually for medical, veterinary, and business schools. And a lot of those people are actually going to really have improved human capital, improved earning potential from that. The typical college grad does not have $50,000 in student loans. It's more like $10,000 to $15,000. Personal loans, generally a bad idea. The place where people really get in trouble is borrowing money to pay healthcare bills, because obviously illness, if it's not covered by insurance, can actually be harmful to your human capital, no fault of yours, but you're having reduced earning potential at the same time that you're having high bills. And medical bills are the number one reason people end up actually in bankruptcy. And then credit cards, lots of pros and cons to credit cards. The best way to use credit cards, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, is to use them and pay them off in full every month, not pay finance charges every single month. So don't spend any money on your credit card that you couldn't spend in cash. It's just another way of making payment, but you're only spending money that you actually have. Finance charges are so high, and the interest rates on credit cards are so high, and there's really no advantage to using that. Here's a little example. I'll let you read it, and then I'll come back and talk about it. The way you want to calculate this is you need to figure out what her average daily balance is. So her average daily balance, $50 for 15 days, $125 for 15 days. So calculate that out, figure out the actual average, 15 times 50 plus 125 times 15, divide that by 30, and then multiply that by 0.02, and that will give you her finance charges. Okay, a few other terms. Truth in Lending Act, Fair Credit Reporting Act. You can pause and read those. Also noted at the bottom here is that if somebody steals your credit card under these laws, the most you can owe is $50. If you do have a lot of debts, the priority for paying them down should be number 1, pay down anything that has a high interest rate like a credit card, and then number 2, cars and student loans. Because you need your car and you can't get rid of the student loan debt in bankruptcy. And whichever one has a higher rate, you want to do that one first. And again, as I said, we don't have much time here, and we don't have much need for additional banking information. So we can talk about some questions about balancing a checkbook. You should know that FDIC insurance insures bank accounts up to $250,000 per account at different banks. And a restrictive endorsement just means that you can sign a check and say for deposit only before you deposit it.